Tell me
Yeah.
about your philosophy and how that's evolved a little bit over the years.
And so, yeah, I think really my movement practice started way beyond that with dance and improvisational movement and being really comfortable with that idea of exploring movement, especially with the improvisational piece of it. And I've always loved anatomy as well. So it's like where I am now is I love it and kind of bringing all of this together. So I did start with a yoga teacher background where I really quickly after getting certified kind of shifted into yoga therapy and studied with someone out in Canada who really focused on the kind of like how is the body built to move and then related it into yoga postures and yoga in and of itself. And I was really drawn to the anatomical piece and the movement exploration. And so that those classes we were saying before, like, didn't really look a lot like yoga on the outside. And so a lot of the movement was like a much more like less is more approach to movement, which really started to build in that deeper body awareness. And then I kind of shifted from there over the years to bringing in the somatic exploration and lens. And the focus of the somatic, the clinical somatic certification that I received was a Thomas Hanna's approach, which is sort of, I don't know if it's fair to say came from Feldenkrais movement, but he studied with Moshe Feldenkrais and then kind of
Mm,
created from there some differences in the work. So I was kind of bringing in that movement modality and still kind of linking the two, sometimes linking this more like movement exploration in the body also interweaving in functional movement and then showing that how that could shift and turn into a yoga posture. And then more and more over the years, really, the movement classes are much more focused on mm, just exploring and not. So, I guess one big main difference I would say it's not about like get into this posture and then move into this posture and then do this posture. It's really looking at this movement. It's not a a formal sequence or anything, but it's kind of like instead of like if I were to turn my head to the right and turn my head to the left and be like, all right, I'm going to just do these head neck movements. Or I could actually tune into what is it like to start to feel things shift as I turn and let my head move over to look toward a shoulder. And then noticing like, oh yeah, what does it actually sense and like feel like in the neck? And then if I slowly let my head go to the other side, kind of enjoying the exploration of the transition from point A to point B instead of just boom, I'm getting here and I'm going to do 10 repetitions of something, right? So it's
mhm,
really trying to get into what is the actual sensation of the movement? What does that feel like? And what is it like to pause? What happens in my breath if I go to a certain point? But then if I really crank it, because I think, well, my neck can go bigger than that, right? I want
mhm,
a bigger, more powerful movement. What actually happens when I force a movement compared to when I let a movement just unfold in a way that my body is ready for. And so the classes really have an opportunity to explore in that way.
mhm.
And definitely weaving in some of that awareness I kind of mentioned, like what happens with the breath when we do a certain thing, right? And like noticing how is this breath a part of everything we do.
And do you tend to have a structure that you're plugging those improvisations into, or is it even more open-ended than that?
I would say maybe sometimes it's really,
Mhm,
really more open ended, but oftentimes in my space, like in my mindset of like what I want to bring to class is okay, I would love for people to move three dimensionally and to really get a sense of what is rotational movement? What is like movement in the side bending area? What is it like to kind of arch and curl through the spine? So I'm really trying to think of helping people move in that three-dimensional way
mhm.
and so I usually try to bring in that each class as well.
Okay.
And I
So
usually try
that's a recurring theme for
that would
each of
be
them.
a recurring
Okay.
theme just because I feel like we tend to kind of live in a sagittal plane of like sit, stand, walk, go up and down stairs, very much like that. And we
We
really
are
need
fronts and backs, and
we are
that's
front and
it,
back.
right?
Yeah.
We're only two-dimensional.
And we're mostly fronts, really, if we think of like forward focused and all of that. And so even when people lie down on the ground, it's like oh, there's your back. Like, feel your back on the floor, move it around
Mm,
a bit, and, like, let yourself actually have that sensory information, and sometimes I'll have people have their back against the wall so that they can actually feel the back of their pelvis, the back of their head or shoulders or whatever when they're upright vertical plane, and so with the somatic movement, a lot of the exploration is giving the brain a chance to explore movement in a way that is not the rote memorized way of moving,
Hmm.
so that the brain then pays more attention. And then there's new movement patterns that can be introduced. And I bring in a lot of engage and release kind of explorations, so that for a lot of holding, like muscular holding, that might just kind of, like whether it's use patterns or it's from an injury, compensation pattern, or whatever, I'm kind of working with some areas that might tend to hold tension and actually have people do movement explorations where they're engaging that area and then practicing releasing it and then
Hmm.
noticing what are the different sensations of that, and this idea of like neuromuscular re-education, bringing
Hmm.
in new ways to do something and making it novel and new on purpose.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I love how we come at things from different backgrounds
Mhm.
and approaches, but I've always found a common thread in how we think and break things down. I
Yeah.
tend to want to keep approaching things a little bit differently, that we're not set programs.
Yeah.
One of the things movement practice I've been working on is I've been doing karate for the past almost 3 years
Mhm.
now, and
Mhm.
you have your forms you do. In our school, when a lot of people think about a kata or a form, they have that like everyone lined up doing exactly the same thing in the exact precise way. In our school, like you got to learn the kata and do the right moves. But once you've got the basics, once you've been able to like do a correct back stance, the
Mhm.
timing, where the accent is, where you hold, where you pause and explore something a little bit differently is encouraged. Not only
Mhm.
encouraged, but required for advancement. So
Yeah.
within our school, in order to get a black belt, I'm currently working towards my brown. In order to get a black belt, one of our katas has to be at the made our own, which
Yeah.
I'm working my brown belt, so I don't fully know what he means with that. But even in the making it look good for the brown belt level, it's like, don't make it look good the way I'm doing it because I don't have the same body as you.
Yeah.
Each person
Mhm.
is on their own path for their kata.
Mhm.
So,
In my classes, I really encourage people to don't like, I'm gonna offer you things to try. Doesn't mean you have to do them, right? Really giving people the permission to notice, how is this thing I'm offering for you to do? How is it actually landing in your body? How is it actually feeling? And then I'm oftentimes just, I mean, if I see somebody that looks like, oh, what I'm offering isn't landing necessarily in a way that seems like the most helpful, I won't even necessarily like, sometimes I will suggest something specifically to one person, but sometimes I'll just generally and broadly like put it out there for everyone as a reminder, like, hey, or you could try it this way, scale it back this way, or maybe expand it this way, and to kind of just open up the possibilities of where people can explore. And then I always usually really like to bring in a little bit of like, take the next 10 breaths to move on your own. And
mm,
some people, they've grown, I think, to love it. But at first, I think it could be daunting because you're like, well, I'm here because I want you to tell me what to do. But really, what I'm trying to do is, and I'll say it, is because ideally tomorrow you're going to do something like, oh, I'm really noticing like my shoulders are sore or my back or whatever. I'm going to take the next 10 breaths and I'm going to do something that feels good in my body. So
mm,
I'd like an example of trying to build in these ways that you take what we do in class. I mean, I want people to come to class, don't get me wrong, but
mm,
I want them to take little snippets of it and do it throughout their day so that really they don't need to come to class because they just feel better in their body and they know
mm.
how to do it for themselves. But I love when they keep coming to class.
Well, I want to talk about that, the micro breaks and the bridges, as we sort of were talking about in the last episode, in a little bit. But there's something that I've been exploring in my movement. And
Mm,
again, sort of taking the martial arts, I have a criticism of a lot of movement practices,
yeah.
especially when it's sort of like, which is not what you're doing, but when people are like, oh, just sort of explore your body and do free form work, which is
Mhm.
a great starting place.
Yeah.
But when people sort of just explore without any sort of cueing,
Mm,
they tend to follow the patterns that they've always followed.
exactly.
And additionally, if someone really likes opening up their shoulder
Mhm.
and stretching and they're like, "Oh, well, I keep doing that, so I'm going to keep doing that." Like this is I don't the amount of range I'm showing here and I could crank my shoulder more. I don't
Yeah.
see much reason to put my arm back here
Are.
reaching
Yeah.
behind me. In fact, I see a lot of reason for me not to train doing that so I don't reach into the back seat while I'm driving and tear my
Mhm.
rotator cuff trying to lift up a bag.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
So there's a safety and like nervous system conditioning of like
Mhm.
these are good places to be in, good positions to be in, not to too
Yeah.
much judgment of good and bad. But if it's too open ended, then you might be setting people up for injury. So one of the reasons I like martial art is if it's not a good martial position, if it's not a safe martial position, it's probably not a safe position in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
That, but
Yeah. And to
I
speak
guess.
to that, yeah, is I will oftentimes so I think of things as incremental
Mhm,
explorations. And so usually before doing a big movement of reaching the arms up and down like this, I'll start with roll your arm in, roll your arm out, and we'll spend some time doing internal external movement. And then I'll be like, raise a shoulder up, release that, kind of
mhm,
pull the shoulder down, release that. What is it like to bring the arm up with the elbow bent?
mhm,
Compared to the arm with the arm lengthened. And usually every time in class, shoulders is something people bring up as they're curious about or they have something going on. And so right from the beginning, there's a notice how anything I offer feels for you. And I also talk a lot about how I'll just kind of show for those who might be watching, right? Like I could raise my arm, but if in order to raise my arm, I have to arch my back and flare my ribs to raise my arm. Like that's really different than exploring what is it like to just raise my arm without everything else getting involved, and
mhm,
does it feel like to do it this way? What does it feel like to first start just moving the shoulder girdle complex and getting a sense of like building
mhm,
incremental movement and building load. And so really what I'm hoping with that is because they get these like building blocks and they're also building hopefully that idea of like, oh, this is oh, I can feel my shoulder blade moves when I roll my arm bone out and oh, my collarbone and I kind of have people touch here and feel where their collarbone meets their sternum and that when they move their
yeah,
arm, oh, there's a little joint there. Can you
mhm,
feel how that joint moves a little bit? So I'm really trying to get people to be way more aware of what they're doing so that if they do try to do that thing back here where they're like trying to pick the bag up behind them, like that they will have like what you're saying is like, oh yeah, that doesn't feel good. That feels like a long lever with something heavy at the end that I'm straining to try to do with a
mm.
very intricate part of the body, you know? I don't know if
So,
that
but
kind of speaks
yeah,
to
so
what you're saying.
you're bringing awareness. You're not just saying sort of
Move however you
you
want.
move however you want. You're bringing in, but you're not saying move this way either. What you're doing
Right.
is you're bringing awareness at every step of the way,
Yeah.
and trusting the body, the nervous system, to actually know what's safe and what's right. Because if you're checking
Mhm.
in and not just following a dogmatic rule of Irvin says don't reach into the back seat, there might be a way that's a good idea to reach into the back seat or is safe,
Right.
and that might not be that you're encouraging real embodiment in it and building
Yeah.
the tools versus just saying these are no's or these are yeses, which I
Yeah.
which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
Um,
And going back to this idea of three-dimensional movement, right? It's like, well, if I need to get something that's behind me, if I just do it this way, or if I just do it this way, that's really different than for the people listening audio. I just turn my neck and head trying to like force to be able to see behind me, or I reached with just my arm and I'm like straining at my shoulder girdle to reach behind me. But if I use my whole entire torso and actually rotate and let
yes,
my pelvis move and then let my neck and head and then do something, that's really different if it's a whole body exploration.
yeah, which maybe not the best idea to be doing any of those while driving,
Not while you're
but
driving. No,
but if you're
these are
going to reach
different
into the back
examples.
seat while you're not driving, then there's getting your hips under you and having that awareness is
Bring it back.
and having it not be an isolated body experience. I love
Mhm.
that. So we talked about bridges in the last episode,
Yeah.
and we talked about, and I tend to think of as micro movements or micro breaks. One of my favorite things to do for people is be like, well, your shoulder hurts. Shoulders seem to be the
The
maybe
thing.
because we're
I
looking at
know.
each other's shoulders on the video,
Yeah.
but shoulders seem to be the example of the day. But I tell someone, well, if your shoulder and neck hurts, and you're having some pain there, let's figure out a way to build into your schedule 4 times a day for you to take 3 seconds to bring your shoulders up, bring them down,
Yeah.
reach the other way, or do some shoulder circles. And I just got come up with a very simple routine for someone that they can
Yeah.
do in 30 seconds to 2 minutes. And then be like, if you remember it, by the time you've remembered it and come up with an excuse not to do it, you could have already completed it.
Yeah.
So let's figure out times that you can remember it, and then that you
Yeah.
feel okay with. Maybe one person's completely fine doing that while waiting in the grocery line, and someone else is not.
Mhm. Yeah.
um, but
Totally.
So it seems like what you've talked about both in the relaxation, learning to habituate sort of bridging a relaxation throughout the day and move and
Mhm.
micro movement is similar to the micro movements. How do you habituate breaking up either your inactivity of sitting at the
Yeah.
computer
Mhm.
with some activity, or how do
Yeah.
you break up your activity of being hyper alert with some relaxation? That they're it's a similar thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I beyond me being like, yes, I love micro movements and micro breaks, and that we compartmentalize like, okay, I'm gonna sleep tonight. I'm gonna rest when
Mhm.
I'm done making dinner. I'm going
Yep.
to exercise when I get home. I'm gonna go to the gym for an hour when I get home. And that's this
Mhm.
compartmentalizing that seems to me beyond the fact that you're putting a lot of pressure on that gym visit. And if
Mm.
the car breaks down, then now you have done zero exercise today. There's
Yeah.
also, you've put a lot of pressure on that gym visit, so you're more likely to injure yourself.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like I love micro movements, and I will say that I get that not very many people love the idea of them because it doesn't feel like you're doing enough. Because I think we've been like hardwired, trained to be like, it's gotta hurt to be good and like, like force, force, force. And so I really feel like what you're doing and what I'm doing is a lot of like providing another option, right? And it does work for some people. And I think when people actually have a chance to try it, they're like, oh, that actually feels really good. And I've had a number of people be like, it doesn't seem like we did very much, but like I feel so much better. And that whole thing. So I think there's a little layer of kind of getting people on board a little bit to try it. And then it's how do you do that in a way where it lands for someone? So whether it's in a group class or an individual session, I will be really deeply listening to what feels important to this person so that I can kind of speak their language so that right from the get go or throughout the whole entire time I'm with somebody, I'm not just trying to get them to do something different. If they are like a power through, right, I'm going to try to be like, yeah, and try it like this for a little bit, let's see. So, yeah, I think it gets really interesting. How do you bring in, because there's just so much good amazingness in with learning how to scale things back a little bit.
mhm.
But I think it can be hard for the mind and the emotions to be able to meet that because there's so many layers involved in how we live in our bodies.
If some is good and more is better, which then why would we ever just do some?
Yeah, exactly. There's a sticker that a person from class gave me because she's like, "This is what you do." And the sticker she got from a therapist, the quote she got from a therapist, but she made the sticker. And it said, "Do less with more intention." And I just love
Mm.
it because it's just like, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. A little bit less, but we're like really building that intention and awareness piece. Yeah.